Hello?
Greetings, Counselor. You're coming in loud and clear.
Thank you, Kerry. Good to be with you, Kerry.
Likewise. See you soon.
Hi, Council Buck.
Hi, Ed. Nice to see you.
You too. You too. Good
Not
to
too
see you.
far. Not too far away.
Right down the hall.
All right. I just sent something to counselor inboxes, so if folks could print it out, have staff print it out, that would be great. Welcome, Counselor Edwards.
How you doing? Can you see and hear me? I can't.
We can see and hear you. Can you see and hear us?
I can see you only, but I'm sure everyone else's screen is off, so that's why.
Thanks, Anna.
Oh, good. Okay.
Um, So I just, like I said, I sent counselors a document, if folks can get that in front of them, and we will get started in earnest at 2:10, just so that people have a minute to kind of come in. Hey, Counselor Sabi George. See, your hand is up. Just waiting for a few more colleagues to join.
Sorry, I thought I was still in the wait room. Thank you.
No, you're here. We got you.
Thank you.
But just before you logged on, Counselor Sabi George, I did ask counselors to get themselves a copy of what I just sent over.
Oh, thanks for that heads up. Okay.
So if you can, yeah, print it or pull it up, that'd be great. And Counselor Flaherty, same. Welcome. So sorry about your family.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been taxing for the last few days, but back on the road to recovery again.
Yeah, so hard though.
For my edification, Madam Chair, what's the process for the hearing?
So if you can get a copy for yourself of what I just sent over, that will help lay it out. But it's an us conversation. And you know, in response to, I volleyed something over, administration sent something back like an hour ago. So we're going to be discussing that and next steps. But I want to just wait until I've got everybody in before I sort of.
Great. So it's a working session with, it's a council working session.
Yeah, council working session, yeah, because we had the administration and the public testimony yesterday. Sorry, everyone, just a delay because out of courtesy to the president, I don't want to start without him, so hoping to start shortly. President, you're here.
I apologize for my tardiness, Madam Chair.
No, no worries. I didn't want to get started without you.
I apologize to all colleagues and colleagues in government on. Good to be with you all.
Thank you, Matt. Good to be with you too.
All right. So we will get going then. I'm just sorry, I just want to check, of course, just as you came on, Matt, I lost Michael, so I'm just going to check with Michael whether he's. Okay, this is like whack-a-mole. Michael will be back in 2 minutes. He is at the parking. All right. So just so colleagues know, I will gavel this back into session so we can get the tile down. Carrie, Candace. Great, thank you so much. And just so colleagues know, I actually read all the dockets and everything in at 10 a.m. when we convened the working session. So I won't be doing that now. Thank you to everybody for your patience and kind of also being patient with the fact that we moved this working session from the morning to the afternoon. We wanted to be able to make it as productive as possible. So I'll just, as Michael's logging back on, kind of go over for folks where we are. So I think as everybody knows, last week we talked in council about the sense of dissatisfaction with the budget as filed, specifically around some of the kind of bigger picture issues facing the city and things that councilors want to see addressed with greater urgency. And in our Friday working session, we talked about what some of the categories of investment to address those concerns could be. And I raised then, the idea of us doing a special appropriation. I guess maybe I raised that on Wednesday. Really making this more of a kind of collaborative people's budget, working with the mayoral administration to get that filed as a way of getting to yes on Wednesday, which is now tomorrow. I think, as everybody knows, I feel very strongly that this council can and should lead on the budget and on getting the city to a stable budget for the coming fiscal year that starts Thursday. So we talked about a bunch of categories on Friday. Yesterday we had the formal hearing on the resubmitted budget. So we did talk about some of the good things that are in the resubmitted budget. And her public testimony. And at that public hearing, one of the first things that I asked the administration was sort of formally whether they are amenable to going this special appropriation route with us, because obviously I should say it's not something that normally happens. I don't know of it ever having happened, but these are extraordinary times. And I think that we often have to think outside the box in those moments. So Chief Sterrett did, on behalf of the administration, say that they were open to such a course of action if we could get to a place where, with a special appropriation, the council felt comfortable voting for the operating, such that sort of the two things together make up more of that budget for Boston that we all want to see. And so last night, after hearing that at the hearing, sent them a letter that was really like a summary of our discussion. I didn't put forward okay, it's these numbers exactly, because I didn't feel like we had landed there as a council, and I wasn't going to take that prerogative. But the administration has been following the conversation. They've read my memo on Friday. They're aware of kind of what councilors are thinking and talking about. They sent back about an hour ago a suggestion of here are categories that we think we could fund and at what scale, for a special appropriation from them that comes to $18.5 million. I think it's certainly worth noting that we've never done a special appropriation like this for budget passage before, and that the resubmission went up by about $10 million. So that's a major increase in some of these concentrated areas that we care about, beyond what the council saw in the resubmission. But now I think the question is sort of for the council to circle up, look at this, react, think about where we feel like this still isn't necessarily meeting the moment, where we think it is good. I think there's a lot of good stuff that they're up for doing. I think probably the biggest gap is on the AOP front. But wanted to talk to councilors about this because, as people know, for the administration to file they need to file a special appropriation, late file it, in order for us to vote on it. And that's obviously something that they're only going to do for tomorrow. If it's something that gets us to yes, gets at least 7 of us to yes on the operating budget. So that's kind of the conversation ahead of us. And I thought that I would talk through what they sent over, and then open the floor up to counselors. I do want to note that I'm joined here today by President Matt O'Malley, who's been a real leader on pushing with the administration to collaborate with us and to think about this budget moment as we come down to the wire here in a different way. So I'm super grateful for his leadership and to be his Ways and Means Chair. And then we're joined by Councillor Ed Flynn, District 2, Councillor Lydia Edwards, District 1, Councillor Liz Braden, District 9, Councillor Anissa Sabi George at large, and Councillor Michael Flaherty at large here. And I do want to note that there is a press conference, I think at 2:30. That's the one unfortunate thing with the timing shift. There's a couple of folks who are at that, but also have this document. And so, yeah, so Councillor Flaherty, since you just joined, I won't re-summarize everything I just said, but the basic gist is, you know, in yesterday's hearing, which I know you had to miss for a family emergency, the administration did indicate an openness to, you know, reaching some agreement with us on a special appropriation in order to kind of address some of those urgent areas for counselors and get us to a point where we're able to support the operating dockets. And so I had sent over to them after they said that kind of a summary, a qualitative summary of our conversation, knowing that they've been watching all of our conversations, and they sent back a suggestion on the special appropriation front for what, after they circled up with their budget office. And so that's just got that about an hour ago. So that's what we've got from them. And I think it, like I said, reflects a willingness to make some significant new investments in some of the major categories that we've discussed. But there are probably still some things that as counselors we might want to circle back on. So that's my preamble. And if folks want to turn to that last sheet, that's just a sort of spreadsheet. The proposal from the administration was to sort of meet us on our categories for a supplemental appropriation for a total of 18.5 million. As I noted before, that's about double the increase in the resubmission. And it would be for another 5.4 million for AOP, which would get us, as folks know, there's 4.6 in the other order. So that would get you to 10. Another 3 million for mass and CAS, which would be doubling what's in there. Another 2 for BPS supports. Another 3 for green jobs, which right now has 1, so that would get you to 4. Another $500,000 for the young adults program, which has 300. The young adult jobs has 300 right now. Another $500,000 for the High Roads Kitchen program that Councillor Edwards has championed and piloted. Another 600,000 for the BHA Wi-Fi, which right now has 400,000, so that would put it at $1 million altogether. Another $1 million for childcare and early learning. I know that we discussed both the question of whether that was a universal pre-K thing, or my sense is it might be best used in that childcare entrepreneurship fund that they've already got 300 in, because it seems like with pre-K our challenge is identifying the quality seats and not the money. Another $2 million for slow streets, which I know has been a big focus of Councillor Flynn's. And $500,000 for a green home retrofit program, which is one of the things I know our president had raised. So that's sort of the administration's volley back to us, and wanted to open the floor now for counselors to offer their comments. I'll go first to President Matt O'Malley.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bach. Yeah, I mean, this is, for those who may be watching, this is less of a formalized hearing, more of a working session. So I really value a discussion. A couple of things are important to me as it relates to operating. I think BPS, there's still many, many concerns, which you illustrated in your letter. But suffice it to say, on operating, I'd certainly appreciate the acting administration hearing many of the concerns raised by many of us through the last week. Think that these are some positive signs, of which I am appreciative as both a resident and the official. Do want to make sure and really open it up to the body, and we're not on here, but we have a bare quorum on this call, and really hear from other folks, because it's important to me. You know, the budget process is always important to me, first for my district and my constituents. But given my position as president pro tempore, I want to make sure that all councillors feel valued, respected, and heard through this budget process as well. And, you know, I think, as I have said, we, as a city, want to get to yes on important votes like this, want to get to feeling that we, if not unanimous, have some broad-based agreement. So I really want to make sure that with this added language and added initiatives, this truly is more of a council/mayoral budget, which is what I think the public deserves and demands. And I want to, you know, look forward to hearing from more colleagues on specific thoughts, questions, or concerns as we get into the next, you know, remaining 22 or 21 and a half hours before we actually take this vote. Obviously, I've been pushing a lot of environmental initiatives. I was delighted to see included language around home energy retrofits. This is something that I'm taking on as my signature legislative piece, the Birdo 2.0 ordinance. I should say technically amendment to the ordinance. And just so folks understand it the way that I see this and have been sort of articulating with the administration, it's an opportunity to create a funding stream that would be open up to Bostonians who wish to make some energy efficient upgrades to their homes, for both, you know, homeowners, for tenants. I think this is a great modest amount, but one that will have a profound impact. So I'm delighted to see that clearly illustrated as part of this council's initiatives. So that's all I have for this this first statement. Thank you. And thank you again, Councillor Bach, for your great leadership in this. It is a thankless task, but a vitally important one. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor O'Malley. Yeah, and two things. Yeah, just from a clarity perspective, because you raised it, I do think that we've been, and I said it both in my letter to the administration and also in the memo that tops here. Like, I think we've generally been treating the BPS docket as kind of a separate thing. This is really more of a operating docket. The administration did suggest that $2 million for BPS student and family supports, but certainly, in general, this is an operating discussion, and I know that there's some ongoing policy conversations about the BPS budget. And then the other thing was just to make sure that I was clear before, because I got a text that made me think I was not clear. So this is a proposal for a supplemental that'll be funded out of the American Rescue Plan funds. That's an additional $18.5 million. That's additional to the new money in the resubmission, which was $10 million plus 5.6 for the pension change that's in the COLA docket. So I was offering that as a kind of comparison point, but this would be 18.5 on top of the 10 that's in the resubmission. Of course, all of that is on top of it's as part of the overall 3.6, or maybe now almost 3.7 billion dollar budget. Okay, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Bach, and to President O'Malley as well for your strong leadership during this time. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. Before I begin, Councilor Bach, I wanted to see if you had an update on the child care center here at City Hall. Do we know what the current status is of that? That's an important issue for me. I don't know what the latest status is on it, and that's why I want to see what impact we could have in helping getting this childcare center back open. There's plenty of money, so there should be no reason that the childcare center is closed. So I want to know, do we have an updated answer on that?
So my impression is that the City Hall Child Care Center is open. Let me just, also, I mean, I'll ask the administration to send me a note on that, but I believe it's open right now. I think it's been, I think it's, yeah, it's fully staffed, open and operating, just got a note. And will be fully operational in August. So I think it has been open, it's been fully staffed. It sounds like maybe not everyone was choosing to send their children, Councillor Flynn, but that they're sort of expecting to be having a normal cycle year starting in August.
Okay, I just want to make sure going forward that that child care center has the necessary resources to provide quality childcare for workers in need. So I know there was a mention in the supplemental about childcare. So I was curious if that childcare center here was impacted, so.
And Councillor Flynn, if I can just say on that, so that was one of the things, I think Councillor Wu raised it in the Friday working session, the idea that one of the areas where we might want to put some additional funds because of the situation that we see ourselves in is the Child Care Entrepreneur Fund, which there's a $300,000 increase in the budget as it is for that fund that helps support, you know, those small childcare providers that have increasingly been going out of business. And so the idea is that since we're losing so many of those seats in the city, we might want to turbocharge that investment.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Block. I appreciate that response. Again, want to say thank you to Councilor Block and President O'Malley for their hard work, inclusion of so many priorities that City Council has had in this year's budget. One of my top priorities, as you highlighted already, Councilor Block, is pedestrian and traffic safety. And I'm glad we're investing more funding into that area. I know that Slow Streets program is very popular with residents citywide. Many neighborhoods have applied for this program, but unfortunately they were not selected. I have heard from my colleagues. My colleagues also have mentioned that we need to think bigger than this idea of neighborhoods competing against each other. I know we had discussions about that obviously in the past, but I think we need to drastically scale up this program with speed humps, traffic calming infrastructure on major corridors and heavy traffic roads across the city of Boston. It's not enough just to implement slow streets in selected neighborhoods, but in all the neighborhoods of Boston. I think this is a discussion we should have as it relates to the hundreds of millions of dollars of American Rescue Plan money coming in over the next 5 years. If our streets and sidewalks are not safe, nothing is safe. I was at a meeting last week at Medal of Honor Park, M Street in South Boston, with 200 people. And they were furious with the city of Boston about pedestrian safety related issues. Unfortunately, we've had another death in South Boston on the corner of N Street and Broadway. And I met with residents immediately after that on site with Amy from Transportation and with C6 Boston Police. So it was a very difficult conversation we had for several hours, and residents are expecting us and demanding from us, not just in my neighborhood, but I'm sure across the city of Boston, a significant improvement very fastly, very quickly on making our streets safer, especially for persons with disabilities. We see a lot of young mothers and fathers with children walking their child in a baby carriage. Persons with disabilities. I've seen a mother in a baby carriage walking across the street. She's in the crosswalk, and a car will speed right by her as she's in the crosswalk. The car's going 40 miles an hour. I've seen elderly people in the same location almost get hit by numerous cars and persons with disabilities. So I believe this is a public health emergency. Pedestrian safety. I'm very concerned about that. And I don't think we're spending enough time on it. I don't think we're spending enough money on it. It's frustrating. Residents are frustrated about it. And they're demanding action from the city council and from other city officials in the mayor's office. So let me go on to another neighborhood I represent is the South Boston waterfront and the Ford Point Neighborhood Association. We don't have a public library. We don't have a EMS presence. We don't have a fire station, a police station, a public library. We keep developing the South Boston waterfront without any regard to public safety. The response time for EMS is rising. It's going up. And as we continue developing, it'll continue going up. I don't want to be a city councilor that can't deliver for my district on quality of life issues. We desperately need an EMS presence in the Ford Point area or in the South Boston waterfront. I don't know how many times I need to say that. Again, I'm thankful to my colleagues in the administration for their leadership on how we can ensure that this budget will make needed investments in these issues. This is an important moment in our city, but we want to make sure the city works for everybody. And during these difficult times, it's also about quality of life issues that we've not discussed really in great detail. I think we need to get back to discussing quality of life issues and the impact they have on residents. So I'm looking forward to hearing more comments from my colleagues. Thank you, Councilor Bork.
Thanks, Councilor Flynn. Yeah, and I just wanted to say quickly on slow streets that I totally agree. And one of the things when we dug into it, when we were trying to figure out the money, one of the things that we figured out is that our slow streets, that competition you were describing where our neighborhoods are sort of fighting with each other for safety, which isn't where we want to be, is partly that there's just been one team that's working on the slow streets issue. And so they have, that's kind of a bottleneck. So I'm really glad that because of your advocacy in the resubmission, there's this doubling. So there's like a whole second team basically to operate. And I think that plus this like money to actually execute, right? It's like you need the money for the actual stuff that goes in, but you also need the people to process it and make it happen. So hopeful that we're going to kind of open up the aperture on that with all these combined resources because the council pushing on it.
Yeah, thank you, Council. And I failed to mention is there's a critical role too for residents to abide by the current speed limit, which is 25 miles an hour. That is going very fast in the city. It really should be reduced to 20 miles an hour. And we need to have strict enforcement of the current speeding laws by the Boston Police. But 25 miles an hour is extremely fast in any residential neighborhood. I'm concerned about our seniors and persons with disabilities and young families with little kids walking to school, walking to the playground, walking to the library. My parents walk to the library or to M Street Park or to St. Bridget's Church, and people are going up L Street 50 miles an hour, just without any regard to our seniors and to little kids. So I know I've said it 1,000 times, but we have to take pedestrian safety issues seriously in this city, because if that doesn't work, nothing works. Thank you again, Councilor Block, and thank you, Councilor O'Malley, for giving me an extra minute.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Braden and then Councilor Edward. Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for pulling this together. I'm looking at this list of additional funds, and I share Councillor Flynn's concerns about pedestrian safety and slow streets and safety for all of our road users. And I know here in Alston Brighton, we've been working with Amy Corning over the last year and a half to try and do some street calming in one of our residential streets that's a problem. And I know the great benefits of having extra staff to do that. And also this $2 million will go some way to actually, from the material point of view, and capital investment, and actually enacting the plans that the staff will come up with. So that's very helpful. I also welcome the green retrofit program, green home retrofit program. As someone who lives in an old 110-year-old house on a day when it's 97 degrees out, I really feel that improved insulation and energy efficiency will go a long way to help make our city a greener, more sustainable community. I'm also happy to see the childcare early learning money. I hope that goes to support our childcare sector, our childcare providers. We've lost a lot of family childcare providers during COVID, and I also know from talking in our community that there are folks who desperately need childcare that's affordable and accessible. So I'm hoping that some of this money would actually be used to recruit and train new childcare providers who may set up childcare cooperatives or whatever. That we need to start thinking outside the box in terms of having a workable response to the childcare crisis in our city, so that families can afford to, both parents can afford to go to work and not have one of them stay home to do childcare because it's too expensive to do otherwise. Green jobs like yourself, Councillor Bach, I really feel strongly that green jobs are absolutely essential. We need to, if we're going to enact our urban forestry plan and grow more trees and sustain and maintain those trees, I feel that the green jobs sector would be one area to train young people to take care of trees, be apprentices and ultimately become arborists. I think it's a wonderful thing. We also need lots of work in the retrofitting, so making our buildings more energy efficient. So I think it also sort of supplements the work under the Green Home program. So there's many there's good things in this list. On the AOP position, $10 million won't go very far. So as someone who is constantly talking about affordable housing in our district and across the city, I feel that we may need a more robust response to on the AOP line. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. For on all those things, very much concur and agree. As I said at the start, I think that AOP is probably the space where we're the furthest in terms of the scale we were discussing from what the administration suggested. So, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Just very brief, well, not at all very brief. Before I get into my comments, I did wanted to note, again, we're having this conversation, I think the first of its kind, on a budget, on a supplementary budget, as in asking for a third round, if you will, on the budget because of your leadership. And I want to acknowledge that because Councillor Bach is so dedicated to getting this done, she is convinced that the administration to come back to the table and I think it's unprecedented move has gotten them to give more. And that's what we're discussing today is what they're going to give more for. But I just wanted to congratulate her and acknowledge that creative thought, that leadership. And again, just note that in this process, by far, it's because of her creativity, her intelligence, her thoughts, and her dedication to the city that we're even in this room having this. Let me be very clear, that I am even in this room having this conversation. And with regards to the now the third submission, if you will, of a budget from the administration of the supplemental budget. So when I discussed the specific concerns that I had with the second submission of the budget and the overall budgeting process, I do want people to note that I said I'm looking forward to a reset, that the political ambitions are put to the side, egos are put to the side, and then we come with the goal of getting something done. And that's why I'm here. I also said that we need to meet the moment that we are in. And there hasn't been a poll that hasn't been put out, even the most recent poll, I think this morning, that says that housing is the number one issue for this city and people who live here. And that was my concern, that we're not treating that moment or any of the actual response from people. We're not taking it seriously in the supplemental, or the original budget and the second budget. And then I would argue even in this supplement as well. The other thing that I mentioned is it's not beyond our technical capacity. It certainly isn't beyond our budgeting capacity, that every person who wants to interact with the city of Boston can do so digitally, essentially in any language. So any service should be able to be provided, short of street work or infrastructure in the street, should be able to be provided. We should be able to interface and interact with our city government in any language. That is also something I don't see truly reflected in this third budget at all. I understand BHA is going to get $600,000. That's on top of maybe some other funds that they had for their Wi-Fi, but
Another on top of the 400. So
on top of the 400.
Yeah.
Right. We are going to be having a robust discussion about digital infrastructure. And I use that word intentionally. This is about digital infrastructure for the entire city. Councilor Flynn went in great detail into the actual streets and infrastructure that we physically see, but this is no less than that. And that the ability to access your government through today's technology is, I think, a civil rights. Certainly, it's responding to folks with disabilities. It's responding to this moment right now. And it's the only way we were able to function for the past year. So the fact that we have no, I think, clear infrastructure for our digital imprint and for the city to move in such a way that, again, we can access any service in any language is disappointing. I propose that we have, I think it was an additional $5 million at least put towards that. And if this is you can lump it in with BHA Wi-Fi, but digital infrastructure needs to be accounted for. There's no way, shape, or form I can support something that doesn't do that. Moreover, we're having the conversation about an ordinance that actually creates a city law that we will have to do it. So I think we're all on that page where we want to get to the point where we have digital infrastructure here. We were willing to send up a home rule petition to push to make sure that we could. So I don't see it actually funded, or to the level it needs to be. But back to the AOP and housing. Again, it's the number one issue. And so to get the additional, I think 5.4, that was on top of the 4.5, so together $10 million is not enough. I'm proposing, and I've said before, I want $30 million just for AOP and $10 million for land trust. The two are not the same. I'll give you a perfect example as to why. Suffolk Downs and East Boston, if we had a land trust or funds, we should have been able to go and purchase some of that land. AOP would help you build on the land. But just bumping up the AOP alone isn't enough. And this is not a big enough of a lift to meet the moment that we're in, the housing crisis that we have. This isn't enough. And so I'd love to talk about how we can get that, again, as close to $30 million just for AOP, in addition to what's already been allocated. So again, we're, I guess, at $10 million increase over the original budget right now. So that would be we're at 10 million with the supplement and supplement plus today's third try. So that would so I would be asking for $20 million on top of that. And then separately $10 million for the land trust. a program that is about us acquiring land. I will leave Mass and Cass to some of my colleagues who have pushed for that. I do see it's doubled. The $3 million is a doubling from the $3 million in the SUP. So I think that's a good start. I will leave BPS alone. In terms of the green jobs, I do appreciate the $3 million. I will note that in talking with the administration, I specifically asked to look at how that conservation corps and youth jobs and green jobs are combined in a way that allows, especially in Charlestown, for us to really be stewards, environmental stewards, and push for our tree canopy. And then in terms of, again, I had a good meeting, I would say, with the administration just now on transportation specifically within my district. I echo Councillor O'Malley's his comments, which came down to, we are districts, he and I at least, are district city councilors. And so actually, is it just districts on right now? The district city councilors get a shout out. Okay, just the district.
Councilor Flaherty is here as well. So
okay, all right.
Got at large.
All right, we got an at large. Every now and then you get an at large. But the district city councilors, to our credit, are here on behalf of our districts. So anyway, but I did want to echo that. That's so for those who are watching, I had a separate meeting with the administration down to the streets, crosswalks, and infrastructure in the District 1, which is East Boston, Charlestown, and the North End. So I do think there is a pathway forward, Councillor Bach. I do, but you have heard now from me, there's infrastructure that needs to be put in, and there's absolutely the AOP needs to be deeply increased for me to show that we're meeting the moment of the housing crisis that we're in, as well as a land trust pathway. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry. The High Roads Kitchen, they're putting, my understanding, it's $500,000 on top of the 550 that was already in there, bringing it to $1 million. I did ask for that, so thank you to the administration for meeting me there. So I want to acknowledge that. That was a good program. And then one question that I think, or one clarification you can make for all of us, Councillor Bach, they're probably wondering, well, where's all this money coming from, or how much is available to be given out? If you could just go back and explain the ARP total amount, that there's 50 that's already gone out, and just kind of what we're doing. I think it would help with clarification.
Sure, happily. Yeah, so the American Rescue Plan funds folks have heard about. They've probably heard that there's, 450, 500 million, right? You've probably heard those numbers get thrown out there. The way it works is that we get half of the American Rescue Plan funds this year, and then half of them next year, and they can be used all the way through 2024. And they need to be used in a few different buckets. There's some things we're not allowed to use them on, so pension backfilling and such, for instance. But as the city thinks about expending them, the city needs to use them for revenue replacement for places where we've had revenues go down because of the pandemic. But then also the city can use them for kind of, and I would say we need to hold some for if we need revenue replacement, because for instance, the commercial property development market slows down. And so in a year or two, there's budgets that are leaner because of that situation. So there's some sort of long-term thinking on revenue. But then it can also be used for kind of big picture, one-time things that really move the ball forward for the city and tackle some of our bigger structural challenges. And so and also for continuing immediate impacts of the public health and economic crisis that we're in, right? So it's that backwards looking, how do we fill the revenue that we need, and how are we going to fill revenue that we might be lacking going forward? How do we deal with the crisis we're in, economic, public health, and then how do we do some of these bigger structural things? And right now, what the council has before it in terms of proposed ARP appropriations are a $55 million appropriation that helps fund the operating budget that we're considering. So we just don't have as much revenue this year because of the economic situation. And so the ARP does that backfilling function. And then we have another 50 that is proposed for kind of 3 to 6 month immediate things. It's like continuing our small business grants relief grants, it's continuing the vaccine rollout, it's some of this money already suggested for AOP and Mass and CAS. So it's some of the kind of like quick hit the ground running money, and that's sort of the second ARP docket that's before us. I think that to Councillor Edwards' question and point, basically the idea here is this: we're holding a significant amount of ARP money at that Councillor Flaherty's committee is going to be doing oversight and planning with the administration on in the coming months. And I think the tension that the council has dealt with is, on the one hand, some of these bigger picture moonshot things, you do want to take time and have community process and get all the stakeholders in and talk about them. On the other hand, there's certain urgent things that have come up a lot in the past week in our conversations that like really need support now. And so the question is, how do you balance those things? And so the proposal with the supplemental is for some of that American Rescue Plan money that's sitting unprogrammed right now to go to support some of the things that the council feels are missing in the budget. So that's the basic idea of the supplemental appropriation. And I do think, Councillor Edwards, to your point, so I agree that we need to go back to the administration and ask for a higher number on AOP. And I also think that, and I also take your point about wanting some ring fence space for land trusts so they don't just get crowded out by the kind of CDC acquisition like world. To me, with the land trust thing, the important thing would be establishing that beachhead. Because when I look at these categories of things we're talking about spending ARP money on, there's no question that we're going to have to spend more. So for instance, like I'm a huge advocate on the Conservation Corps green jobs front. Like to my mind, that is a space that the city is going to need to move into in the tens, of millions of dollars. And there's no question in my mind that we're going to want to be, over the course of the next few years, talking in the hundreds of millions about housing. I think that the question in some ways is, how do you get these categories established so that then you can have the community conversation about putting in bigger and bigger sums? And so I do think that we should push them to do more. I don't think either you or I intend to have this supplemental be the last word on how much of the rescue plan funds we are using on housing and other priorities. So that's part of the balance. And we're also going to be going to Michael's committee with those priorities as well. Speaking of,
but
go
just
ahead.
to be clear, right? There's two. I still want, and I don't want people to assume it's just a no. We don't want the AOP program because of CDC. That is a concern, but anybody can apply for the AOP program, right? So everyone should not understand that. But I think they function differently. Not everyone has a development plan, but getting land off of the private market so that a smaller nonprofit or a group of people can get to build differently is also the goal. It can buy people time to develop. So I just wanted to, they function differently. That's all.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's also where you and I discussed on Friday. I think that there's an important role on that side, on the land acquisition side, that we could actually use the BPDA's powers for good. And I think, to your point, that doesn't need to be a BPDA ownership route, but from a pass-through perspective, that's how we got the DSNI land back in the 80s. And I think that thinking about a mechanism like that, where we're sort of on our land trust behalf, swooping in and grabbing things and then transferring them, could be an important part of that conversation.
Yes, but I guess what I really want to make clear, right? I'm not interested in watering down or coming up with like money for land trusts. That's my lobby to the administration.
Yep.
Thank you.
Got it. All right, Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up and reading through all the documentation. If I can just get some specifics more on the additions with the BFD as it pertains to the West Roxbury district, and also want to put an ask in for the second one over in your district in the Longwood Medical area. That's another area that is deficient when it comes to BFD support. So that's sort of the first one. So I appreciate in the resubmission, they added one, which covers West Roxbury area as it pertains to the gas line that's out there, which will help in the event that we have a situation that we saw up in Lawrence. And obviously Longwood Medical area, from my perspective, is ground zero, particularly someone that's hell bent on wreaking havoc and or looking to disable, our sort of nerve system as it pertains to healthcare, et cetera. So that would be another area that I think right now is left unprotected. And if they'd be so inclined to add additional support there. And obviously the West Roxbury pipeline, that one can start immediately, and willing to allow at the discretion of the commissioner as to when the second one would start, and ideally probably after the first of the year or sometime in the spring. But that's number one. Two, I would have hoping to see more around the youth job portion. And if we're really going to put a dent in youth violent crime and keeping kids busy and out of gangs and off of drugs, and have them staying in school and focused on their future, then I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of a contribution in that regard. So I appreciate the overture of the 500,000. I think that we're still falling short, and we're not meeting the moment as it pertains to our youth. And as you know, or maybe you don't know because you is relatively new, but our youth would come into the chambers regularly pre-pandemic, banging pots and pans and looking for additional resources and more summer jobs and more year-round jobs. And I heard them loud and clear then, and I'm hearing them loud and clear now, and not quite sure folks are hearing them loud and clear across the hallway. So I'd like to see a little bigger commitment as it pertains to sort of youth jobs, not just the summer jobs, but the year-round jobs, and somehow create some pathways for those youth to take advantage of all the jobs that are coming online. If, we're not going to have a curriculum in our Boston public schools that sort of is geared towards or caters to the jobs that are coming online, particularly as it pertains to South Boston waterfront and all the CEOs that are moving their companies and their labs to Boston, we ought to at least have an opportunity through job training programs to be able to assist in that effort. If we're going to talk about closing the achievement gap and closing the opportunity gap and closing the wealth gap, it starts with all those job opportunities that are coming online. And yet we're missing the boat because we're not making the necessary commitments and investments in our youth. And so I think like to see a little bit more on that front. And also decentralizing the services over at Mass and Cass. I don't know. I don't think anyone can tell me that anyone's getting straight and sober over there. So it's become its own community, lots of drug activity, lots of exploitation, lots of drug and activity and violence. And so I think by decentralizing that and also putting pressure on our suburban counterparts and colleagues in government that represent a lot of the communities where a lot of the individuals that are over there come from. Those folks are their residents, they're their neighbors, they're their family members. So it's become a Boston problem. But if you do a census over at Mass and Cass, I'd argue that there's probably 3/4 of those individuals are not from Boston, but it's a Boston problem. And, we need help. It's arguably it's a regional problem, but it's been framed as a Boston problem. So we need a regional solution. We need treatment on demand. We need these communities to step up and help us and provide treatment and recovery and aftercare options. This 30-day, 60-day stuff doesn't even cut the mustard anymore. If you've been on the opioids for an extensive period of time and you haven't been in your right frame of mind, then you need to have at least a year of good, clean, sober, drug-free living just to have a fighting chance. And then obviously those wraparound services, the aftercare, the education, the housing, the healthcare, the job training, that's all part of it. And so again, I don't think we're sort of meeting that crisis as well. So I'm still have some concerns that we have some more work to do, obviously within the next 18 to 20 plus hours in order to try to get to a place where I'm comfortable in this budget. And so that's the straight scoop for me. And I know that obviously my colleagues have additional concerns, and I'll echo and support them. Obviously, as a district council, that's one of the things that I've always prided myself on, and making sure that as an at-large councilor represents the entire city, that I back up my district colleagues, particularly during the budget process. I want to note that I do appreciate the administration's $5 million supplemental investments in AOP, but again, I think I'm calling for a larger increase. We know the program works. And I just think we need to have, we need the ability to augment our efforts in the affordable housing sphere, separate from what we extract from our IDP, our linkage program, the CPA program. So AOP alone won't solve the crisis, as mentioned by my colleagues, as pertains, as particularly my previous speaker, Councilor Leader Edwards, but it can definitely help. I do appreciate the larger commitment to the green jobs, including staffing the Parks Department. Again, I want to recognize that we still don't have a legitimate bona fide tree planting, tree pruning, and tree canopy division. We farm that out to the tune of lots of money when we could have our own division. So if we're going to be serious about the environment, we're going to be serious about planting trees and creating tree canopies and also pruning trees when needed. And the ones, particularly the ones that are causing public safety hazards, then I think we need more focus there and having funding for a legitimate standalone sort of tree department. That would be important to me. And also we needed more funding prior to the pandemic, around, as I referenced, the youth jobs. And so I'd like to see an increased commitment on that front. I also want to kudos on the Safe Streets piece. There was an additional 2 million added there. And I think that's important. I've raised the issues about the octopus intersection at American Legion Highway, Cummins Highway, Canterbury. We've advocated along with Council Flynn for the speed humps, particularly in areas where there's been a significant number of accidents. There's actually been fatalities. And also the intersection over Reggie Lewis Track Center in your district, Madam Chair, Roxbury Crossing, as it leads to Malcolm X Boulevard, the crossing of Commonwealth Ave and Beacon Street, West Broadway, Dorchester Avenue, as well as numerous intersections in East Boston that are extremely hazardous. So I continue to advocate for more resources on that front. And then the capital funding for climate ready initiatives, clear understanding of how we're going to prioritize these projects with the climate equity and environmental justice lens. That would be huge for me. And the best clinicians, Boston Public Health Commission initiatives over at Mass and Cass, and also increasing capacity for ISD and DPW to accelerate the needle pickup initiative and the sidewalk cleaning and sweeping over there. So I'm trying to think what else comes to mind. And obviously, one of the issues we've dealt with obviously is around the overtime and keeping up with attrition. One of the needs that we have obviously is to make sure that we have our police districts. As a citywide council, I go all across the city. People want more police, not less police. They want to see the walking beats. They want to see the bicycle patrols. They love their community service offices. They love their captains. So, and there are people concerned around the quality of life issues where they want more attention to curtailing, that type of activity before it grows into, to violence. So I think that when you have the number of retirements that we're having and we're not seeing the backfill and we're not seeing the class sizes that we used to see, then that becomes an attrition problem. And then becomes that districts, in order to have minimum staffing levels, have to require their men and women, our officers, to take extra shifts or to stay on longer, forced overtime, et cetera, like that. So, and that's driven by the demands that the city is putting on the department. So it needs to be a two-way street for fairness. Are we perfect? No. Has there been some abuse? Absolutely. But I think that a big factor here is making sure that our districts are minimally manned, and we need to do that by keeping up with attrition on that front. So, and obviously then, as someone who was born in public housing, just making sure that we're continuing to foster the public-private partnerships with our public housing. As you know, Madam Chair, they've provided huge dividends for our most vulnerable residents around the affordable housing side. So that's it for me for now. Round one.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. And I just was going to say that just on two of your questions, I know that there is 1.1 million in that in the resubmission for the fire thing, as you alluded to, assuming that it gets passed. And on the young adult jobs front, there's also 300,000 in the resubmission. So this 500,000 would be in addition to that. So just adding those clarifications. I want to note we've been joined by Councillors Andrea Campbell and Michelle Wu. So I'll go to you both next. Just for a quick recap, because I know I set it up top, but basically, as you know from yesterday's hearing, the administration did indicate a willingness to work with us around a supplemental in order to get to yes on the operating budget. And so I sent over a sort of summary of our discussions to date. I didn't put hard numbers on that because we hadn't as a council come to a firm view on that. So I sent over kind of the categories of discussion, knowing that they've been watching our hearings and reading our materials. And they sent over this response about sort of places that they felt like they could meet us and collaborate on a supplemental appropriation. So that's what's in the attachment that I sent right at the start of this working session. And that's what we've been discussing. So Councillor Campbell, I don't know if you want to offer any comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. No, I think I said what I needed to say at our, the hearing, yesterday, I guess all days are running together, yesterday. And just curious, I'm assuming the letter that you sent in the package via email, we're waiting on a response from the administration to some of the things you lifted up in that letter and in your attachments?
So yeah, in the letter, yeah, I sort of summarized everything. And then what we've just gotten back, because it's all been kind of compressed timing wise, was this sort of suggestion at a supplemental. There are still questions. Are you asking about the questions we asked yesterday in the hearing? Because there's definitely still stuff outstanding from that.
Okay, that's what I wanted clarification. Okay, so I will continue to wait for more responses from the administration on the outstanding things and specifically what you lifted up in the letter around the overtime piece and the details on that as well.
Yeah, and that definitely remains a outstanding issue, is sort of how we feel confident about reaching the administration's projections on overtime. You and I share a lot of concern on that.
Thank you.
Councillor Wu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I was not able to move a different commitment, so I'll make sure I go back and review. So just wanted to pop in here to be listening to the conversation. For my part, I think we've seen from the beginning that there's a moment that we need to rise to meet, and that requires bold strategic investments. I think we're continuing to see a lot of smaller level discussions and smaller pools of money here and there, testing out things or piloting things, or sort of creating a sort of starting point for a conversation. And I will make sure I'm up to speed, but for me, moving only, having the biggest movement come only from the federal funds doesn't quite address the underlying concerns that I'm having, but I will continue to be engaged and make sure that I'm fully up to speed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Wu. All right, do other councillors have further questions that you didn't get in or comments that you didn't get in the first round? I do think that well, I'll just see if anybody has anything, and then I'll offer some summary and thoughts on next steps. I see Michael Flaherty raising his hand. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just also wanted to talk about the Office of Food Access. I wanted the ability to increase the operating budget to support additional staff and to have a more robust programming. Also, the Office of Returning Citizens, increasing operating budget to support, particularly around Corey, job placement support services. And lastly, something that we've talked about in previous budgets is the FinCom. FinCom sort of arguably to some degree overworked, but also underutilized. We really don't play to their strengths. And if we did play to their strengths, then clearly we would need to increase their budget capacity for additional staffing. So that's going to be continued to, and then you and I have talked about obviously the stuff around landmarks and making sure that they are respected in the process and that they are obviously funded and staffed appropriately so that we're engaging landmarks and protecting our beautiful historical edifices in the first inning and not playing catch up and or missing the boat. And so that's another area that really needs a little love, and there might be an opportunity to do that in this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. And it did come up yesterday. We are seeing a significant increase in landmarks in the resubmission. So I think, thank you for your, as you know, that's a shared advocacy point of ours. So appreciate you on that. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Borg. I'll be very brief. One issue I know I talked to the administration about was over the last 18 months, the increase in cases of persons with HIV and AIDS has gone up dramatically. So I have spoken to public health professionals about it. I do know that there is money in the budget that we will provide more services, counseling on prevention, but also on persons living with HIV and AIDS. I know that's a critical issue, not just in the Mass Ave Albany Street area, but throughout the city of Boston. BU Medical Center came out with a study yesterday that I read about HIV and AIDS as well. So that's certainly an important issue for me and in my community. The other issue I wanted to highlight that hasn't received much attention is this book right here, The Health of Boston. It's put out by the City of Boston Public Health Commission. So my concern with it is, and they do it by neighborhood, but my concern has always been that the report doesn't specifically target the Chinese community in Chinatown, because the demographics of it is too small. So they include the Chinatown community and the surrounding area, which would include the Ritz-Carlton Hotel and some of these luxury apartments and condo buildings. But it takes away from a real targeted look at public health concerns of the Asian community specifically, or the Chinese community, I should say. It has been my goal to have the public health professionals look at and study the Chinese community in Chinatown. And they have very different public health challenges and concerns than other people that live in the neighborhood that are non-Chinese. So it's important for me to study this data so I have a better understanding of my constituents. I've requested this. It's important. It's also about fairness. It's also about equity, but because the population is too small, the city can't capture it. Public health professionals can't capture it, but I think we can capture it if we put our minds together and we invest a little bit of money in it, and we take time and do it right. I'd be happy to help, but I think it can be done in a targeted, in an intentional way. And the public health of the Chinese community is important. In Chinatown, they have the highest rate of asthma of any neighborhood in the state, actually, because they live next to the Mass Pike. They live next to the highway system. They live next to the MBTA system. They live near the South Station bus and train terminal and the truck route from Maine down to Florida. So asthma, diabetes is very high. Women getting examinations for breast exams is very low. So I think we can do more work on public health in the AAPI community, and that's something I would like for us to discuss in this budget. But I just wanted to throw that out there, Council Block. Sorry to get off track a little bit, but I just thought it was important to address.
No, thank you. Thank you, Counselor Flynn. Counselor Edwards?
Hi, thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure I raised my hand only after a comment from Counselor Flaherty. I wanted to note, I do actually disagree with the increased budget for the FinCom. We had this debate for those before some of our members who are here today joined the body, but it was specifically around an IG, an Inspector General, proposed by Counselor Andrea Campbell. And at that time, only 3 people actually voted for it. The FinCom was in opposition because I think they felt that they were being supplanted or being removed or something like that from the process. And noted again that they have, are willing and whatever to be, but I just will not support an increase in their budget in any way, shape, or form. Unless it's to create the position that Councillor Campbell has discussed, which is an IG, which is an Inspector General, that is supposed to be moving around the city specifically and holding us all accountable. I also wanted to note the quick note on mass and cast. I was hoping that with the increase in the amount of money, that there was also a plan for a task force that actually is going to be coming up with deadlines, dates, and actual goals for that area. I'm not interested in just increased money without actual increased accountability. I think Councillor Baker brought up a task force of really just get there and figure this out, and whether that include EMS, fire, police, if that was a presence there. But I actually do think there should be an accounting, how many people are there currently? Do we see an increase, and how we get those numbers to go down throughout the summer, if not for the rest of the year? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Yes, and I mean, I know that there's an existing task force that would definitely be engaged. I agree with you about the accountability point. And I will just say on FinCom, and Councillor Flaherty, I'm not sure if you have your hand up again, so I'll go back to you. But I would just say that our goal here in this 11th hour special appropriation front is really to do things that there's broad agreement on the council, need more funds in this moment. I think there are a lot of ongoing conversations that we're all going to keep having throughout the year. There are a lot of conversations about the future of the city that are frankly being had in the mayor's race right now, with 4 of our colleagues really in the lead, and one of them likely to be our elected mayor in November. There's any number of things that we are not going to solve with this budget. We have to be asking ourselves in this moment, what is it that gets us to enough for us to pass a budget in good time for the start of the fiscal year tomorrow? And I do think that is a duty and responsibility that the council has. And I think that's why it's good that we've been coming together to have these conversations. I appreciate the administration offering to do the supplemental with us. And I think that, there's some clear themes coming out about things that we want to see more of on the AOP front, on the, I heard you, Councillor Flaherty, on the youth jobs front, on, the land trust and digital infrastructure piece from Councillor Edwards. So I think that Councillor O'Malley and I will, have a role in kind of going back to the admin with some of that feedback. I'm sure they've also been watching. But I just really want to stress for everyone, it's important to me that we get to a place that really is a council mayor budget. That's a collaboration to get to yes for the people of Boston, without any illusions that this budget is going to be the be all end all of the challenges we face, and without minimizing the role that frankly leadership plays in the leading of the city. But we do leadership, also requires appropriations for the things that we need to fund in the city. So just wanted to make that comment. Councillor Flaherty, I'm sorry, I lost track of
Yes.
whether your hand was up.
Yeah,
again.
no, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. No, not looking to debate FinCom. Obviously, that was already debated, and obviously the council was divided, and those that sort of believe the role that they have to play and or wanted to support it, and there's others that felt that we needed a brand new sort of standalone, sort of an Inspector General type of thing. So it's that has obviously been asked and answered and debated, and frankly, I just think if FinCom was given a different name that was more sort of conducive to sort of investigatory or giving them investigatory powers, we may have a different discussion. But yeah, not looking to revisit that. I raised my hand just to just check on the status of having chiropractic services added to the formulary, given the city's bargaining power as in the healthcare sector. And I think that we talk about overtime, or more importantly, the cost associated with folks out on injured leave and or FMLA. There's significant cost to the city of Boston in that front. And arguably, if we just had chiropractic services, folks could go get an adjustment and be back to work that afternoon. So I just don't understand the resistance, quite frankly. And I don't have a legitimate explanation from the administration as to why we, as the, we have that bargaining power for, like something in the vicinity of 18,000 plus city employees and their families, why we're not using that bargaining power to negotiate having chiropractic services added to the healthcare formulary. So for those that use it, and I'm not one, but for those that use it, it makes a huge difference. And instead, we allow folks to have to make, go to the emergency room and or make an appointment with their primary care, only to get a referral to a specialist and x-rays and MRIs. And then sometimes it gets a little worse with prescription drugs and Flexerol and Oxys, et cetera. And then the chase is on. And I just think that there's a better way to do it that will get folks back to work quicker and safer. And it starts with putting chiropractic services on the formulary. Instead, I think the administration wants to defer to collective bargaining. In fact, the matter is it's our health care department and personnel that sort of is in the driver's seat there. And if folks want to do business with Boston, if these insurance companies want to insure our employees, then they need to put chiropractic services on their formulary. And instead, it's a debate, and then it trickles down to, well, and they get it to the bargaining table. It just doesn't make any sense. It should just be a given that if you're a city employee, chiropractic services are on the formulary. Whether you want to take advantage of them or not is up to you. But there's a huge cost savings if they are on the formulary on the back end, because the way it works now is that, we've got folks taking significant periods of time off when if they would just go get chiropractic adjustment, they'd be back to work that afternoon. It defies logic. I need an explanation. It just gets pushed down. It just gets pushed downhill. And the fact of the matter is, someone at a high level, it's probably lobbying. It's probably who you hire situation. But the fact of the matter is that any insurance company that wants to do business with Boston should be required to put chiropractic services on their formulary, period. It shouldn't have to trickle down to the bargaining table where we're negotiating whether it's on or it's off, because clearly, the bargaining units, the unions, they're always going to ask for more wages and bigger percentages, and sort of they're not going to really be, throwing chiropractic services isn't going to be at the forefront of negotiations. It should be a given, and it needs to be a given. And that's my concern.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Flaherty. And yeah, no, I know it's been a long running concern, and the PUC, obviously negotiations only happen every 5 years. So it does seem like something that if it's going to move would be good to move sooner than that. Thank you everybody for those comments. Any other councillor comments? If not, then I'll just say again, I think that if we can get to yes, win a supplemental tomorrow, it really will be, as Councillor Edwards said, without precedent, as an approach for the council and the administration getting to yes. But I think it is an important approach for us to take, so that we are not in a position of going to a 112, and so that many of the things that councillors have advocated for in the budget and in the resubmission become reality. And I think that the supplemental the administration sent over is a good start, but not enough. And so like I said, I'll work with Councillor O'Malley as our president to continue to have those conversations this evening. But just would appreciate everybody's continued attention and participation on this front. And really stress that I think that the people of Boston elect all of us to work together and figure out when we have differences, communicate them, figure out what's the space we can collaborate on, and get to a place where we're able to fund critical services. And I know that we heard yesterday from some of the folks involved in the youth and immigrant programs that start next week. Although I'm a procrastinator by nature, think that some deadlines are really important to reach. So I really want to thank counselors for, I know that this working session, yesterday's hearing, and the Friday working session were all, obviously scheduled in great haste. And I really appreciate everybody making time for that, and everybody's engagement on what the real central urgent issues for the city are. And definitely we've still got work to do, but I would really like us collectively to get to yes on the operating budget with a supplemental appropriation that really reflects the council's priorities here. So with that, seeing no further comments, this working session is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate all of your efforts, attention to detail.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you,
Thinking of you and your
Councilor Bach.
family.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Edwards.